Welcome to Containerized Conversations, where we try to containerize our conversation. I'm Jessica Caffarelli.
And I'm Josh Warhurst. Thanks for tuning in as we dive into some of our favorite topics, one containerized thought at a time. So, Monday. What a fun day. Fun day Monday.
Yeah.
October 20th?
Yeah, the internet got a cold. It was a little under the weather.
Yeah, so if anybody's not following or they don't
If anybody doesn't go outside,
they live in a cave. Incidentally, if they touch grass too much, then they might not realize that US East 1, the backbone of the internet, it seems like, went down, or it didn't go down fully, right? It was, 26 services were unaffected, so.
Perfect.
100 and something were affected.
I think the funniest part is even if you don't use the internet, your life was actually affected in some way, shape, or form. I can almost guarantee it. And you know why, Josh? Because I couldn't unlock the door to my child's daycare. That's how out things were.
It's not just like it was affected at work because I was trying to set up EC2 instances for SQA members and they wouldn't get set up and they were pinging me, what's the issue with this? And I was trying to get them unblocked. I'm trying to figure this out. But yeah, that's an obvious situation, right? The fact that a door reader doesn't work.
Yeah. No, it's insane how connected. And then I also saw another article where a smart bed overheated and couldn't decline because of the AWS outage.
My gosh. I mean,
how scary is that, man? Think about that. That's we're so connected now.
Yeah, I don't know if these things that are actually smart are so smart. I mean, I understand where certain things that are obvious, right? Fortnite going down, Snapchat going down, Slack having issues. These things are obvious. They're obviously connected to tech. The door readers are definitely it surprises me because in my mind some of those things might be on a local network, but who suggests that they should be able to get out to the full internet? Right?
Well, not only that, but it's it feels like everyone's on AWS. There are other cloud providers out there. What are the chances that 90% of the things we use on a day-to-day basis happen to just be not only in AWS, but AWS East 1? Because that's where all the outage happens in. I worked for a UK-based company, and all of our UK-based resources were all fine. Yeah, there was an initial global outage, but once that recovered, everything was fine.
Yeah, it is interesting how it's all connected, right? I mean, that so many people use AWS, right? Compared to, Azure, right? There's also a lot of services out there. Let's be honest. Yes, a lot of things use AWS, and yes, a lot of things went out, but not everything.
Yeah. It felt like everything. I don't know.
It certainly felt like that, but all those other, Google was still working.
Yeah.
Microsoft was still working.
Yeah.
Right.
Although no, actually, there was a Google outage, which for one of the Google services, which means Google did use something, which was probably a third-party vendor that did use AWS. So everything goes back to AWS. I forgot what it was, but it was
AWS all the way down.
A Google service went down. I forgot what it was. I don't know if it was YouTube or it was something owned by Google, where you would think it would be all GCP. There would be nothing in AWS. But you can't control what your vendors use. So it's if you use a third party and that third party just happens to have AWS East 1, it's going to go down.
Yeah. And, obviously, it was just US East 1. The problem is they push people towards US East 1 and US West 1, I think, because they have
they push everyone away from US East 1.
But the new features roll out to US East 1 first, right?
The only reason why everyone's in US East 1, you know why? Because Terraform defaults to US East 1 if you don't set a region. So I'm pretty sure that's why most of the internet is on US East 1. There are certain things that just default to US East 1, and I think that's why no one ever bothered to change the region. Why would
I
you? Who
mean, I
cares?
can see that being true. I can. It's just plausible enough that it
Man,
might
I
be
was afraid. I
true.
was afraid to go into elevators that day. I like just one IoT elevator. That's all you needed to hop into, and all of a sudden you're stuck in there until US East One comes back up again.
And it's funny because people learn the wrong lessons from these, or maybe they learn the right lessons,
Mm,
right? I mean, the fact that so many eggs are in one basket, right,
yeah, yeah,
is kind of surprising. Now,
yeah.
there are some people that say, oh, yeah, well, now we should make sure we deploy to multiple regions, right? Or even multi-cloud, right? Maybe we can't
Multi-cloud.
trust AWS and we should do a little bit of Azure and a little bit of
Yeah,
AWS. And, these incidents don't happen that often. They're huge when they happen, but they happen for like a day every couple of years, right? I mean, the amount of investment to like overcome it's almost like if you have a small application that you can really over engineer it for use case that's never going to happen again, right?
yeah. Well, I especially think in this day and age too, where everyone has some sort of third party vendor that they're very reliant on.
Hmm.
Right? Because, like, sure, you can invest and spend all of this money to make sure your infrastructure is multi-region, multi-cloud, fails over, data is placed somewhere else. But if you heavily rely on, some CRM or some external vendor to pull in data and they don't invest that money, then you're still going to go down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like, not only do you need to make sure your things are resilient to a region outage, but you also need to vet all of your vendors and get information from them on if they are also resilient to a region outage.
I
And
mean,
that's a
the
lot of
fact
work.
is all these companies provide SLAs, right?
Yeah.
They say they're going to be up for a certain amount of time and they basically are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if your service can't handle a little bit of downtime, then like maybe you need to really rethink what you're doing. And yeah,
Although,
you're
I don't know. I do argue the original outage in AWS was a global DynamoDB DNS resolution was failing. I feel like that, like, if you were using that, you did plan for the best. That was never supposed to go down.
yes, yeah.
But because of US East 1 resource, so even AWS, the people who say don't be reliant on US East 1, were reliant on US East 1 for a global resource.
Well, that's why they say don't be reliant on it because they know that all of their eggs are in the one basket. Don't put your
That's so
eggs in the
funny.
same basket as AWS.
That's so funny. Yeah, well, and that's the thing. That was the original Alex. It was some sort of DNS DynamoDB thing, and DynamoDB was supposed to be a global endpoint. Yeah, something they had linked back to US East One region that brought it down. So they fixed that, which was really good. They fixed that really fast, but they didn't fix the original US East One outage. So, like, if you were just using the global DynamoDB endpoint, you were perfectly fine. But if you had anything in US East 1 under like the EC2 services, which is basically everything, like I don't think you can get away from using EC2.
Everything is VMs. It's VMs all the way down. Yeah. I mean that is what the cloud is, right? It's just reallocating compute sources.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's like the real big question is if you have data, is it possible to be multi AZ? I don't like that's the hard part to answer, right? Like our RDS does support replicating across regions. So I guess hypothetically speaking, you could have your data, but the data might not be up to date data. And so then it might be hard to make your application resilient to that, right? I think that's the hardest part is figuring out how to make that data layer resilient to an AZ outage. Because if you're just an API, if you're just a website front end that pulls data from third party vendors, sure, you could probably stay up. Just make sure you have multiple containers across multiple regions with a load balancer in front of it. And so it'll be slower for people in separate regions. But yeah,
I
it's
just
always
think
that data layer that's hard.
it's kind of like code more generally. Like anything is possible, right? But it's a
Yeah.
trade-off. there are certain things that are just better for certain applications and certain things that are worse. And all that complexity that you add to avoid an issue like this,
Yeah.
is it worth it when it might just make so many other things worse? Right? Like, oh, let's say you just make it multi-AZ, but you have like Grafana dashboards that now it's getting data from two different sources and like you don't know which is actually the better source to go off of, and you just have to communicate this to different teams, and now you have all this extra documentation. Like, is it worth it? And I think when events like this happen, they make everybody shudder and think, yeah, maybe it is worth it. But in
Yeah.
a week, everybody forgets and they say, you know what, it actually isn't worth it because these things are so rare.
Yeah, and that's what's going to end up happening. There'll be roadmaps to become multi-AZ, multi-region, maybe even multi-cloud. People will work on it for the next 6 months and then just realize how much work it takes. And then realize in the 6 months of them working on it, AWS hasn't gone down once since, and go, is it really worth it? Now,
Yeah.
now, here's a scary thought: is what if AWS doesn't stay up? What if this is a sign of things to come? And it starts going down every month, every week.
Then the haters will be right.
Yeah, I think that's the nightmare. And I think that's the problem. It's always with the knee-jerk reaction. People think, oh, well, what if this just continually happens and this is just a sign? But, this happened before. This happened, I think, in like 2018. I don't know. There was a pretty big US East 1 outage. Same thing. So many things were out, and everyone was like, oh, we have to go to multi-cloud and blah, 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 blah. We haven't had a major outage since today or Monday. So it's a good track record.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is still surprising. End of the day, I was surprised at how many things
Yeah.
failed.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
you saw my post on LinkedIn. Somebody I know, their phone was lagging. And, they made a joke like, oh, what is my phone hosted in AWS? And I just laughed. But, tinfoil hat coming out, right? People can roll their eyes. I know this sounds ridiculous. At first, it sounds ridiculous, but think about it, right? Yes, of course, there probably most likely isn't anything to do with AWS for connecting the call to the cell tower between cell phones, right? Like we can all agree that's probably radio waves. There might be some metric thing in there that Verizon tracks something and that is connected to AWS, which could slow down connections. But like that's way too far tinfoil hat. But I will have to say, a few years ago, I tried to go to a no data phone, right? And what I did was I transferred over to Google Fi. And with Google Fi, you can pay for your data, right? It's an archaic, not a lot of cell phone companies have this, but Google Fi still had it at the time. I don't know if it does now. But you could pay for your gigs up to like 6 gigs. They would max out at 6, and then you would just pay $60 for the phone bill. But if you only used, 1 gig, you would only pay for 1 gig of data. And I was like, this is great. Because I don't really use my phone besides making phone calls. Like, sure, I look at news articles and things like that, but like, I can just bring an iPad with me too and use my iPad. So that was my thought. I was like, I will not use data. I'll try to go to Google Fi. I'll try to make my phone bill cheap. Because at the time I was paying like $100 on Verizon or something like that. And I'm like, I don't need this. And I tried to do that. But what I found out was on a smartphone, even if you don't use any apps, if you have them loaded on your phone, they use like 2 gigs per month on you, even if you don't open them. Think about that. These apps, and I dug into it a little bit, and it was like DNS calls. It was tracking your whereabouts. It was tracking what you were doing on your phone and sending it back to them. All these things that you don't think you're giving them permissions, and definitely if you never open those apps, but they were doing it, right? And so I was I literally let my phone sit on my computer desk for a month just to see how much data I consumed. And I consumed 2 gigs of just sitting there doing nothing data.
That's incredible.
And that's when I realized I was like, I have to use unlimited. If you have a smartphone, you literally have to have unlimited because you're using this now. Fast forward to today with that person's phone lagging. Sure, nothing to do with the internet for making phone calls, but how many of those apps loaded on that person's phone was trying to make DNS queries, was trying to call back home, was doing all these things. And let's say they were not tested for the bad time when something really bad happens. And let's say they're just spewing error codes in her phone, in her log directory, and retrying multiple times on an endless, continuous loop, dying and restarting, dying and restarting. I can feasibly see a situation where if AWS has an outage and your phone is literally clocking because it can't do the things it's supposed to be doing, it is so consumed by resources that you trying to make a simple phone call cannot actually work because it needs the CPU and memory power to be able to connect to those cell phone towers, and it physically can't when your Fruit Ninja is trying to track everything you're doing and sending it and caching it and can't, it's just retrying multiple times, you know? So I don't know. It's a tinfoil hat, but I feel like there, if you think about it for just a minute, you can see how it's possible. It's quite possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. Fundamentally, like, there are so many, it's kind of like dependency hell, right?
Yeah.
There's so many things that are connected to so many other things that
Yeah.
it's really just hard to understand how it's all connected. And most of us just kind of pray, right? They say, does this work? Well, it works on my
Yeah.
machine and it works today, Wednesday,
Yeah.
and good enough. And we'll go on and we'll, worry about
Well,
the errors when they happen.
especially some of these third-party cell phone apps that like you don't know anything about those creators. Like you're downloading Black Hole IO on your phone, like, oh, it's a fun game, and then you just leave it there on your phone. Like I'm sure no one did QA testing on that app to make sure it worked properly under bad conditions. Like,
Well, and it's also grabbing all of its ads from AWS US East 1,
oh,
so there,
probably,
there you go.
probably.
Well, here's hoping it doesn't happen again anytime soon.
Yeah.
And that was our containerized conversation. I'm Jesse Caffarelli.
I'm Josh Warhurst. Have a great night.